Boom, let's do it. Folks, we are here with a special, like a painfully special episode. We're going to address some stuff today that a lot of people go through, but not a lot of people know how to talk about. My dear friend and sister, Ashley, who we have here with us, and her husband, Matt, she came up to me and asked if we had ever done a Hungry for Wisdom episode specifically on miscarriages and things. And I said, no, but I'd love to get you on an episode and do that. And so she and Matt are graciously here to join us. So if this is helpful for you, then great. I'm really glad we actually prayed for that just before we hit record. And if you've got more questions and follow-ups and stuff, then just send them to the podcast question line. So it's 509-867-0070. And you can text them in, and I'll hit those on a separate episode. And if there's a bunch of them, maybe we'll have to have these guys back. We'll see. But yeah, go to, for all the rest of the stuff on the network, go to hfw.network. You can see our other shows and write in questions to them as well. You get a lot of different perspectives from different folks on the Hungry for Wisdom Network. But let's get into it. Matt and Ashley, I'm glad to have you guys here. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, glad to be here.
I know this the idea of this might not be super fun, but I really, really appreciate you even bringing this up, let alone being willing to, make disciples in this whole subject. This is kind of like the bottom of life for some people, this issue of miscarriages. So why don't you tell me what led up to you reaching out and saying, hey, we should do an episode on this?
Yeah, so we, over the past couple of years, I've had a lot of people ask us how to help someone walk through a miscarriage. Mm-hmm. And a few weeks ago, we actually had dinner with a friend, and he had a lot of questions for both of us as their friend was walking through one. Mm-hmm. And it's been on my heart the last couple of years that it's just not talked about enough. And I think there's a lot of reasons as to why that is, but I think it should be talked about more because when you're going through it, you want support around you and you want people to love on you. This
is the first time I've used this microphone actually, and so I'm going to do that. That did not come through in the sound check. Sorry. So
that's okay.
Keep going. You're doing great.
Anyways, so yeah, I mean, the Lord's really put it on my heart to be a little bit more vocal about it, in order so that it can help someone and glorify Him.
Yeah. Yeah, and Matt, how did you get roped into this thing?
Ashley asked if I'd be here to support her, pretty much. I'm happy to talk about it too. Like, the husband definitely has a side that's going to be a little unique, and so I think it's good for me to share some of that. But mostly, I want to be here to support my wife. So.
Yeah, Pastor Andrew and I were talking about that earlier today. How the dads with miscarriage, it's kind of there's two reactions. One is like, wow, that's really rough on my wife, and the other one is, man, why is this hurting me so much? Mm-hmm. And we almost feel guilty for that. So yeah, we'll get into all of that, but I'm really glad you're here, man. So the when a miscarriage happens, I want to kind of stop and frame it in terms of like why it hits people differently, because it happens at different points in the pregnancy, right? Like sometimes people don't even know they've miscarried until they didn't know they were pregnant until after they miscarry, right? So there's kind of different types of grief. I want to, and you can just tell me to shut up if you want, but I want to ask you about your guys' experience and kind of how this whole subject came to hit you guys. What have you guys been through?
Yeah, so we miscarried 10 days ago, actually. It was the 2-year mark. Okay. And so it's been 2 years. And we were 13 and a half weeks along. And I think that having had never, we hadn't gone through something as devastating, I would say, as what it was, losing our little baby. And yeah, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just how, so the question is just how did the experience hit us?
I guess, like how far along were you? What was the actual experience? Was there all the anticipation and then the rug was yanked out? Were there problems leading up to it?
So yeah, for what, we had a big scare. We were on our family vacation. We had a big scare where, there's
we were
bleeding.
10 weeks at that point.
And it was just really bad. And, so we kind of assumed the worst. We get to the hospital and they said the baby looks okay, and so we kind of got hopeful that the baby would be okay. But for the next few weeks, it was just, more issues. Some stuff just didn't seem right. But every time we'd go in, it was kind of like, well, the baby's still looking okay. And so that was, we kind of holding on to that, right? And then finally they're just, it kept going like that. And then there came the time where it's like, oh no, this is not normal. Like it's just happening. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah. So we were 10 weeks when we started having issues. We went through 3.5 weeks of really not a whole lot of guidance from our doctor. We were just kept getting sent to the ER to the point that the ER doctors were like, you need to go see your doctor. But my doctor wouldn't see us.
The doctor wouldn't see you?
No, because I think, I didn't realize it then, but I think having a doctor that really values life becomes really important in those circumstances, because it was kind of pushed off to the point of, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Like the nurse literally told me that. And so we ended up 3.5 weeks in and out of the ER. But at the beginning, there were statistics like, oh, your baby has a 70 whatever % chance of making it, which is really, really good odds. Like, I mean, 70, I think it was like 74%. And so we were really hopeful. But issues continued coming. And it was actually on Matt's birthday that I knew something was really wrong. And I had to call a different doctor to get in because my doctor still wouldn't see me.
Wow.
And so the first time I walked into this clinic, which it was by the grace of God that I found this provider, because it was a much more empathetic office to our circumstances than what I think we would have experienced elsewhere. And that's when we were told, we'd lost the baby. Wow. So.
Yeah, I was over at somebody's house in the church, and they had twins, and it was very, high risk is like an understatement in this particular situation, right? You guys know these guys, and the doctors had said, hey, you should just probably plan on this one baby dying. Let's go ahead and just abort that baby for the survival of the other one. And being Christians, they're like, how about you buzz off? Basically, was the answer. And now they're born and they're healthy and they're running around and they're talking and they're they're crying and it's like. It was just last week. I'm looking at two of these, beautiful little girls toddling around, and I'm like, and they said to kill one of them. And I don't remember which one it was, and I'm kind of glad, but I just want to take a picture and text it to that. But like, you said to kill this baby, so that's tough, man. Because in the medical industry too, like they see so much, and they see so much. They see it go wrong so often that like I do wonder if it can just become a statistic to them at some point.
I think so.
Yeah. Might not even really be a philosophical backing to it. It's just,
right.
I don't know. Well, okay. So then when that happens to you guys, then what are the various reactions you get from people, right? Because I find that a lot of times when difficult things happen, people want to reach out, but they don't know how. So they kind of withdraw, and then everybody feels like they're like alone. So was there good support? Was there, people like well-intentioned people saying just the worst things imaginable? I mean, was it a mix of all of that?
Yeah, I don't think people ever intend to say things that are not helpful, but I think in this situation, there are things that are said a lot of the time that are not helpful. But for the most part, I think we had a lot of support. We were pretty adamant about sharing early on that we were pregnant, because if we were to go through something like that, we would want people around us. And I know not everyone does that. Some people wait till a certain point that feels safer to share, but it's kind of always been our stance to share, especially with our brothers and sisters in Christ. One, to welcome the prayer, and two, if something happens, like we're going to walk through it with them. So. Yeah,
I almost never edit these things, but I do that for Tim. I'm going to move this mic. This is not your fault. The mic's wigging out.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it over a little bit so that when you're looking at Matt, it still picks you up. It's like cutting out. I mean, you sound fine, but I'm just trying to... Of course, now it's right in the shot. Go figure. Most excellent. All right. Tim, we're back. Okay, so help our community out then to know how to help people that are hurting. Like, what were some of the not helpful things that were said, and then we'll go to the helpful things. So somebody well-intentioned says something, and you're just like, bro, wrong move.
Sure. I mean, the one that sticks out most to me was like, we've got Ezra, our youngest, and he's a bit active little guy,
He's a little wild.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun. But
he's at my house breaking something right now.
Exactly.
For sure.
So, you get a comment, something along the lines of like, oh, could you imagine having another one like him? And it's like that that really hurts,
Whoa.
because you're
Yeah.
like,
We actually
would
did
love
imagine
to.
that.
Yeah.
Even though, we're welcoming the challenge. Obviously, that's parenthood, and we want more children. So that stings quite a bit, and it wasn't necessarily always said just like that, but there was kind of comments to that effect that hurt pretty good.
Yeah, and I think like initially, right when we lost, so we went on to name our baby Noah. It was a little boy. When we lost him, I think people again really good intentions, but well, at least you have 3, and it's like that's absolutely accurate. Like I am so thankful, and I think it did bring a new perspective to the 3 we do have by losing one, but at the same time, it doesn't take away the grief that you're now having. And
Yeah,
so,
that almost comes across like, well, you don't need to be sad because,
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that was one of the ones initially that kind of stung a little bit.
So then was your guys' faith in the Lord through all of that? Is this, sometimes this will bolster it, sometimes this challenges it? I mean, how did you find that as far as, your trust in God, your ability to accept what he has done or allowed? Like, was that hard for you or did that strengthen your faith?
It was really hard for me. It was probably the hardest thing I've wrestled with in my faith. It kind of rocked my whole foundation there for a little bit. So I don't actually think people even realized how hard it was for me. I mean, Matt did because he heard it all.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where it's like the promises, the truth, the Lord is good, like Romans 8:28, he's going to use this, and our prayer was that he would use it and that he'd be glorified in it. But it didn't mean that it wasn't a wrestle that I had to understand, and I still don't fully understand, but why it happened, or to come to terms with it and really just hand it back over to the Lord and say, okay, like I know you're good, but man, this is like one of the hardest things I've walked through.
Yeah. This is driving me nuts. I'm getting a different microphone. You're doing such
Is
a
it
good
me?
job. No, it's not. It's like that.
I told you should have taken purple.
Yeah, I guess so.
No, I'm really I'm hoping that, because the problem is there's 2 signals that go into that microphone and we couldn't figure out how to stop it. And so it sounds a little echoey, but one of the signals is dropping, but I hope it's not the one that comes through to the recording. So we're going to find out what happens here.
Okay.
I didn't need to tell you all that.
No, it's okay. I told Matt to take purple. If he would have just taken purple.
Yeah.
Well, I'd just be doing this to his mic then.
I don't know. Maybe he talks louder though.
All right. Give me a second. This guy's just going away. Goodbye, you loser. Hello, tried and true friend that I've used a million times.
All of a sudden, you're just gonna have a different
I
microphone.
know.
Gotta start all over again. Yeah, let's start the episode over and you can tell me all your most painful stories a second time. All right, now. Okay, unmute that one. All right, Ashley, give me a mic test there.
Hello.
Keep going.
Hello.
Good.
Are you sure?
Nope.
Time?
Never. All right, talk normal. Tell me about which of your cars is your favorite.
I don't have a favorite.
Which is your least favorite?
Yeah, which one do you want to sell first?
The Sequoia.
Really? Oh, might be having
Actually, just
some
kidding.
marital
The van.
stuff.
The van won't start right now. So
All right, we
that
got
one.
you. We're good. All right. Now I'm going to... Sorry about that, folks. I had to do some ninjutsu on the microphone there. So the beautiful purple mic is gone, and Sorry for the interruption. So, all right. So now, what were some of the most helpful things that people did in your family or your faith community here at church or something like that? Like, what served you really well in the difficulty?
I guess I can start. I think for me, it was just people acknowledging the situation, like being willing to talk about it and check in. Because I just appreciated that. Whereas, some people might, not want to bring it up and be awkward or not sure how to talk, because it is hard to talk about. I get that. But just people that were intentional, that knew what we were going through and just sent a text or phone call or something like that meant a lot to me, just to know that there are people out there, grieving with us. So.
What do you think people in general need to hear when they're going through this? Is there a pattern to it, or is it different for everybody?
I mean, I think it's different for everyone. Everyone, you lose the baby at different times in the pregnancy or different situations surrounding that. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned through it is the only way through it is through it, if that makes sense. And so joy does come again, and you will laugh again, and you will see just the normal everyday life circumstances in a normal light again. It doesn't always seem so dark. In that, I think that we do two things, and maybe we do it to ourselves. Maybe it's something that is put on us, but I think that we have a hard time holding things together. And so I felt initially that it had to be either joy or grief, and to have them together is still okay. Like, you can go and celebrate milestones. And I say this because we lost the baby on Matt's birthday. We came home from the ultrasound, and our kids had not known we were, going to lose the baby, and they had set up a surprise party for Matt.
Oof.
And so we're instantly thrown into trying to celebrate, but also grieving. And then 6 days later, one of our children had a birthday. And I think it hit me then that we won't celebrate the baby we just lost birthday ever. But it didn't take away from the joy of wanting to celebrate that child. And so I don't know if any of that makes sense, but like just holding things together. Like, it's okay to grieve, and it's also okay to smile and to enjoy certain aspects of what's going on in your life, and to hold them closely.
Yeah, when Emily and I went through that, it was like we found that there was a problem in, we didn't even understand how we felt. We couldn't assign joy or grief to it or whatever. We got really quiet, and our pastor at the time helped us kind of understand, well, the reason that you guys feel cold and distant from each other is because you're grieving. And it was kind of like, but for what? Like, we didn't meet a person, right? And so we were kind of wrestling through that whole thing, and he helped us understand, like, you're grieving for lost plans. You have all this future stuff, and it's not here yet, but that doesn't make it less real, right? And it's just real in a different way, because it's still, your love is there and all these hopes and dreams, whatever. And so he's like, yeah, when that goes away, like, that's lost. That's called grief. And we were like, oh. So then we had some vocabulary to talk about it, and we got to communicate. But I mean, like, what was that? I mean, that was it for us, but what was it for you guys that, what were some of the things that allowed you guys to support each other through that?
I think that's something that kind of hit us out of nowhere, was the awkwardness it created in the marriage. Like, it's like, how do you walk in the door, like for him, come home from work, and how do you ask each other how you are when it's just rough? And so I think there was an awkwardness of, like, how do we communicate through this? How do we process this? How do we talk about it? But then also, how do we continue to move forward and have normalcy for us and for our kids? And so... Yeah,
I mean, I would say, like, it was hard for me, kind of, because, life goes on. So I'd just kind of be in my normal routine, going to work or whatever, and have maybe something else on my mind, a few weeks after, whatever. And I'd come home, and she'd be in a really, like, dark space, like, just really thinking about Noah and, what would have been or whatever. And so I'd get caught off guard sometimes, where I was kind of just like, I wasn't in that position or state of mind, I guess. And so I'd, not always do this well, obviously, but, like, something to do there is to, like, meet her more where she's at, and, like, comfort her in that time, instead of just say, okay, let's move on or whatever. It's been 3 weeks now or something like that.
Well, and I think And I think it's important to say, like, not everyone has that in their spouse. Like, I'm really lucky that he took the time to try to understand what I was going through, and I'm really thankful for how he handled it. And I don't think everyone has that, but in the midst of that, like, we really had to work through, how do we communicate through this? Like, what is this going to look like? And we brought back, we do what we call Sunday check-ins, and it's just a list of questions we ask each other every week. And so we brought that back as a way, when we were going through that, to really try to communicate through it and try to understand each other and what we were feeling.
What types of questions?
You remember? This is a test.
She remembers them better than I do. Like, what was something that brought you joy this week? What was something hard this week? Is there any hurt or sin in your life this week? Like those type of questions, just getting us talking.
How can I pray for you this
openly.
week? What can I do for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So after Noah passed, we did a funeral in your guys' backyard, and you guys structured that in a very intentional way, right? I'm wondering if looking back, you're happy that you did that. You're happy that you did it the way that you did it, and then I want to talk about why, like, because that's a very important part of understanding stuff. So are you glad that you did a funeral for the baby, first off?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. And then do you think that you did it in the way that was most helpful for you and your other kids?
I mean, that's something we ran into with that is there's not a lot of resources out there for how to walk through, you know, a ceremony type thing with a baby you've lost so early, right? I mean, it was like 3 months, but so there isn't a lot of resources, so we kind of had to just do our best. But I'm absolutely glad we did, and I don't know much that we would have changed, but that was just difficult to like think through.
We were
like,
kind of making it up as we went.
Sure,
because
totally.
there wasn't a lot.
it wasn't something that someone else was just walking us through. I mean, no, you were great. Obviously, like, we're very thankful for that you stepped in and led through the actual.
Yeah, but
ceremony.
everybody's experience is different, right? So
Yeah.
there's not like a template for it. But I mean, for the record, the reason I'm asking this question is because I thought you guys did a phenomenal job with that, and I was really happy with, how I saw you guys. One thing in particular was how you got the kids involved, right? You gave I don't like saying people's names on the show if they don't want, but you gave your oldest a role to play, and she had a portion of the ceremony that was hers, and she read a song or a poem or something that
She wrote a song.
Yeah, she wrote a song and read that out, and it was great because she was how old at the time?
6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So her level of comprehension was enough to know that she was sad, but not enough to grasp all the depths of it. And, but you guys brought her into that. So it wasn't something mommy and daddy are going through. It was like, hey, this is something we're doing. And I thought that was phenomenal. So looking back on it, then I'm wondering how you see that now.
Yeah. And I think, you asked earlier some things that were helpful and not helpful. And one of the things, now that you're mentioning it, that we got pushback on was telling our kids we were pregnant so early and then losing the baby. And I think that people handle that in different ways. But it kind of goes back to the same thing we said about telling our brothers and sisters in Christ, like, we're a family and we're going to walk through this together. I also think that it really shapes where the kids are going to put value on life from an early age. And we've seen that play out in our kids. And so going to the funeral that we did, letting them have a role in it, I think brought a lot of closure, especially for our oldest. And even for our second oldest coming up, like, we didn't see that initially, but weeks later she started to kind of verbalize some things. And she was young, but she got to kind of talk through some of that as well. And she still talks about it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think too that it was one of the best examples they could have had of what it means to live in a fallen world and the effects of sin. So we talked a lot about that, about why did the baby die? It's because we are in a fallen world. We have rebelled against God, and that's the effect of sin, is death.
Yeah, and it's so tricky because it's not always one sin that leads to one death, right? There's not always a direct correlation. And so it's like, well, yeah, sin leads to death, but Noah didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, right? And so it's just like, yeah, man, this is the world.
Well, and I think it, for our kids especially, it not just gave them closure, but it's continued to be a talking point in our home, where when we talk about it, they talk about Noah's life, and they talk about the service we did, and they, we have a little memorial plaque, and they will go put flowers out there. And so it's made it something that his life is remembered for them, and it's a tangible way for them to talk about him and to also grieve, because they were grieving too. I mean, especially our oldest, like she was young, but she knew that we were expecting, and it hit her really, really hard. It's probably the first time we've seen her really wrestle with some things and have questions that were hard to answer.
What kind of stuff do the kids say when they talk about it? Like these days?
I mean, it'll be out of the blue. Sometimes we'll find them. It's not as often anymore, but within that first year, definitely walk in the room and they'll be sitting there crying, just missing their brother, which it always surprises me when I see that, because like they wanted him here that deeply, and so I don't know exactly what they're saying, but that's just an impression I have of how they think about him, is that they're moved enough to be thinking about him randomly. I don't know what reminded them or what, but I guess another thing that comes to mind is, when they're drawing pictures of our family, very often they'll draw baby Noah in the picture.
Yeah, pretty much always.
Wow. So, what were some of your guys' go-to scriptures or biblical truths right when you were in the thick of it, the moment of impact in the following, let's say, few months?
Yeah, I really clung to Psalm 23, and Psalm, I think it's 56:8. Not really sure, not positive on that one, but it talks about the Lord like knowing our grief basically, and holding our tears in a bottle. And those were some, and Lamentations 3. Those are some big ones for me, but if I'm being super honest, I was really angry. Like opening my Bible was really hard in the weeks following our miscarriage. And so Matt did a really, really good job of leading me just through all the emotions I was feeling and the grief I was walking through. And
I think the big one for me was, when Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me," for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's what, Matthew 15:19 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So that just gives me a lot of comfort, just knowing that that's Jesus's heart towards children. So I thought about that one a lot. I shared a lot with the kids, just, the end of the book in Revelation, where, every tear will be wiped away. There shall be no more death, right? So like we talked about that a lot. Something that really helped me though, because kind of wrestle. I believe that Jesus saves babies that die. I believe that they go to heaven, but it's not like an explicit biblical text that says that, right? So I kind of wrestled with that when it happened, because it was a lot more real all of a sudden. And so I read a John Piper article that also helped me a lot. It was just his text for it was Romans 1:19 and 20, where he's basically talking about how all of God's attributes are clearly seen, right? And, those who have seen them have no excuse. And that's why, they'll be condemned even if they haven't heard the gospel, right? They've seen that. But his point was, for a baby who hasn't had or someone that's, mentally handicapped or whatever, that hasn't had the mind developed, right, to be able to really grasp that would lead you to the impression that they still would have an excuse. And so I just like that logical thinking there of like, that's how babies and those who maybe can never get past a childhood's mental capacity, when they die, Jesus still covers them. It doesn't mean they're not sinful,
right?
But they're not in that category that has no excuse.
Yeah, 2 Samuel 12:22 and 23, right? This is kind of the go-to, because like you said, I mean,
that one's huge.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot there. And so David's baby dies and he stops grieving, and people are like, "Hey man, like, what, are you okay? Like you just kind of snapped back into it." And he said, "While the child was still alive, I fasted and I wept, for I said, who knows whether the Lord will be gracious to me and my child may live. But now that he's dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me." And yeah, David's personal eschatology there is, the baby is where I will go. And he's the one that wrote Psalm 23 that said, "I will walk in the house of the, or I will live in the house of the Lord forever." he had it down pretty tightly as far as what he expected to have his baby, or the fact that he expected to have his baby waiting for him. Right?
Yeah.
When he went home to see the Lord. So it's kind of a weird question, but like there's, from a Christian perspective, grief and hope are not opposite things. Like we get to talk about these things together, right? I said this it might have been in a sermon on Sunday. I said this recently where it was like, Christians are weird people because we can stand over a dead body and preach about eternal life, and that makes sense to us. And like that would probably be weird if you didn't share our underlying assumptions on these things. But 1 Thessalonians 4:13 is really clear. Like we don't grieve as those who have no hope. We grieve with hope. And so I just feel like that, to me, that seems like a uniquely Christian privilege, right? To be able to have grief without despair. But the fact is, death is so conclusive. Like there is no next step as far as getting your baby back or whatever. So when the finality of that is like hitting you, probably I would guess again and again, right? Then what do your prayers sound like? How did you guys relate to God, given that undoing it was just not an option? Did that cause frustration? Was that one of the faith crisis things?
Yeah.
I mean, what was that like for you?
Well, like I said, I was really angry and I was not in a great spot, but it was also a weird spot to be, because when you have hope, you have hope. Like even as hopeless as I felt in moments, like I knew there was hope. And, so it was a lot of frustration. It was a lot of wrestling with some verses and wrestling with the fact that God didn't answer our prayer how we had prayed he would. But knowing that at the end, we know who wins the battle. We know that there's victory on the other side, and clinging to that. But also, I think a big thing for me was, and that Matt allowed me to do really well, was he kind of just let me be angry for a little bit, but he told me not to stay there. And that was really important for me, because it wasn't like, okay, well, now we're just moving on. It's okay, I'm not going to stay here, but I am going to wrestle with this for a second, and I'm going to be sad and I'm going to be angry. But I also know that the Lord is good in the midst of all this.
Yeah, I think that's something Job did really well was, he got pretty close to saying some stuff he shouldn't have said to God, right? He never crossed the line, but he kind of walked up to it, which is fine. I mean, God's really patient with us. He lets us do that, But he did seem to know that, like, okay, I've got these questions and I don't have the answers, and that makes me really mad. But I know that there are answers. And that's a big box to have open in your head, because as soon as you close that, then there is no hope. There is no, it's all despair. Right? So you've mentioned, Ashley, a couple of things that Matt has done for you. What did Ashley do to take care of you in that? Because obviously mom's got the much harder job there, right? Like she's, not only is it like a mother-child thing and there's that bond because the baby's in her womb, but there's also just like all of the crazy physiological stuff that happens when you're pregnant and then you're not. And like it's just hard on a lot of levels we don't have to deal with, right? But I also don't want the husbands to get lost in the shuffle there, because that's a very real emotional impact too. So what was some of the best things that she did to help you in that?
I mean, part of it was her just being open with me about what she was going through, since I couldn't physically relate to, the stuff her body is going through. So the fact that she didn't totally close down on me, like that really helped me process things too, because I could connect with the situation better. And then, I mean, just like the stuff that she's commonly does, like the fact that she didn't stop doing it. Like a lot of times she'll make my lunch for work or something like that, or have dinner ready, because she knows I really appreciate coming home and being able to get moving with our nighttime routine. And so like she didn't, like there's probably a period where like that slowed down or whatever, but she still helped me out by like, okay, I'm sure it was a lot harder for her in that time, but she still kept up with some of those things that she does, to help me out.
What are some of the differences in the ways that it hit you versus how it hit her? What you needed in grief and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, because at first I was just, when we first got the news, I was just kind of numb, and like, I'm not a super emotional person. I don't know if that surprises anyone, but so I was just trying to be there for her, and I'm just kind of like, that blank, like, is this really happening? That kind of sick feeling. But then I remember I called you to tell you, and like it just broke me to say it out loud. Like I didn't even know that was in me, but I was just like broken, and we had, I think, 2 cars because she'd called me at work when it happened, so I had to drive, and we were all the way in Prosser.
Yeah,
So
he
drove to
actually
Prosser. So I drove back home on my own, like after that phone call, and I just, cried like the whole way home. It just kind of tore me up, and then little bits of that here and there, but and I think it's good that that happened, but it's I didn't expect it. It kind of came out of nowhere.
He actually didn't get to go to any of the appointments until there was no heartbeat for the baby, really. Like, it was
A lot of times I had the kids.
he had the kids
Yep.
or like a work meeting, and so I think it was harder for him to, like, he didn't get to see the 10 ultrasounds I had basically every week leading up to that or any of that. So I think that last one was his first.
Yeah.
Was there any regret with that? Not having been at the appointments and stuff?
I mean, not really. Like I was at appointments, but they became very frequent, so it became not very practical. I mean, I probably could have tried harder to have been there, but I haven't had a regret with that.
It's hard with kids, though, like having to have someone watch the kids, and I mean, especially when we started having issues. I know that was really hard for him not to be able to go into the hospital when we were out of town. He had to have the 3 kids in the car, and I went in by myself.
Yeah, and the reason I ask about regret is not because I think you should have had any. It's because like that. I mean, that was your 4th pregnancy, right? Like, there's a million of these appointments.
Right.
This is pretty normal at that point,
Yeah.
and so,
Right.
yeah. I mean, like, and I'm glad to hear you say that there wasn't feelings of guilt or whatever, because a lot of times that happens where it's like, dude, that's not. We wear things that we're not supposed to wear.
Yeah. Yeah, when I
I mean, I was glad I was able to be at that one.
Yeah. When I didn't bring that up to, I totally was fine with him not going to them. Like, they were just so frequent, and we needed childcare and we needed this and like all the other things. But I do think it was harder for him to relate because he didn't really get to be in the room of an ultrasound until they were confirming there wasn't a heartbeat.
Yeah.
And so
now you guys have another beautiful little baby.
yes.
4th one in the home.
Yeah.
Yep.
5th one in reality. And was that I mean, I don't want to get into all the details of family planning. That's your guys' business. But I mean, when you talk about having another one after that, what was it like to be able to get to that, to that place where you were okay with it? Or was it just a giant surprise miracle from God?
No, I mean, there was a lot. I mean, I think having walked through a loss, there was a lot of questions on if it was wise to try to have more kids, trying to figure out what went wrong. And not everyone gets an answer to what went wrong. Like, that's just the reality of miscarriage. Some people will never know what went wrong. But also just really trusting our doctor that we had found. We ended up staying with our provider who I found when we lost Noah. And really just trusting our doctor on that and some of the things he was saying before we even had a conversation about having more, because we wanted to make sure it was wise. But all that to be said, it was still kind of a hard decision. Having had walked through loss, it kind of changes your perspective on another pregnancy and what you could be walking into, knowing the reality is you could lose another. Like, you don't know what God has planned, and putting our kids through something like that again and all that. But ultimately we decided that after a lot of prayer and hearing our doctor say, like, yeah, I think it's fine to go ahead and have more. And we're really, really thankful, because that's also not everyone's reality, is sometimes they miscarry and they can't go on to have more kids. And I think that's a whole nother conversation. Like, that's really, really hard. But it did change how I felt during another pregnancy after loss. It kind of changes your perspective on it, and trusting the Lord with it and holding it with an open hand, but also just knowing the reality of what could happen kind of just hits different.
Did it make you more protective of your kids that were running around and stuff? Like, were you a little more nervous when they were out of your sight, or, I mean, on a jungle gym or whatever?
No, I don't think so necessarily in that regard. I think that it definitely hit us, hit me especially for the first time, like how, I don't know, it's easy to recognize and to, know God's in control, but when you experience something 100% out of your control, like there's literally nothing you could do differently, then I think the reality of that hits you a little bit more of, okay, well, we really just have to trust God that he knows best, because there is nothing we can do. It's not a decision that we could have made differently or done this or that. And the same goes for our kids that are walking around and climbing a jungle gym or whatever. I think it changes the perspective a little bit, but
Yeah.
not entirely different in how we would treat them.
Yeah, I think I had to wrestle with those thoughts a little more since it happened, because up till then, you know, all of our prayers for protection and, you know, guidance of our children had been answered fully the way we'd hoped they would be. And so then it just kind of got a little more real to me, where I'm like, okay, like, yeah, their tomorrow is not guaranteed. I don't, like Ashley said, I don't think it made me like put more of a bubble around them, but it definitely made me wrestle with it more.
In the middle of all of that, did you guys have the experience that you felt God was present, or did you feel like he was distant and silent? Or, you know, there's no, just so everybody listening knows, there's no right or wrong way to react to this, but there is kind of a spectrum of experiences there. So as far as your guys' prayer life and things like that, I know you mentioned, Ashley, that it was hard to open the Bible and like even get started, but did you have a perception of a distant God or not? How did all that go for you?
Well, I remember the night that we lost the baby. I told Matt it felt like God turned his face away, and I didn't know where he was in the midst of things. And it was really hard. I did feel like God was really distant in the moment of what we were walking through. But I say that, and this is going to sound really weird, but like as much as I didn't know where he was, I knew we were only moving forward because he was carrying us. And that doesn't sound like it's going to make a lot of sense, but I knew we were getting through, and it was going to be okay. And then, you know, the Lord is good in the midst of this, but at the same time, I didn't know where he was in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. That's what the Christian refers to as joy, right? It's not happiness, and it's not even a reassurance that everything's okay, but it's this underlying knowledge that everything's going to be okay in some sense. I've got a risen Savior that says that this is not the final word. Right. So yeah, it is a hard thing to put into words, but it's such a gift also, you know.
It is, and I'm really thankful because, you know, having had conversations with lots of women over the last couple of years that have lost, it's like you see those that grieve with a hope, and you see those that don't, and my heart goes out to both of them. But when you don't have a hope at the end of the day, man, I don't know how people walk through things that they walk through.
I don't know how you do it. Like, and that goes back to that thing about it being a uniquely Christian privilege to be able to grieve with hope. And, you know, we all know people that have lost, you know, I don't know what, 5, 6, I've heard, you know, 8, 9 babies, and they're not believers. And it's like, where does that go in your head? Like, how do you even process something like that? Is this all just random or what?
No, I don't think they necessarily do, but I think, and I've had conversations with lots of people. And so I think that it goes back to how the world views life, though. Like when you have a world that doesn't view life from the moment of conception, and then you lose a baby and you have held that view that life doesn't begin there, then you're confronted with grief that you don't know what to do with, because it doesn't match what you've said up until this point. And so I think, I don't think they know what to do. I don't think that they can fully process what they're walking through, because it doesn't make sense in their head, because they're all of a sudden feeling a certain way about something that they said was never actually life in the beginning. Right.
And then do you notice any patterns as to the logic that by which they just keep going? Because I mean, they keep getting pregnant, right? And there's still hope somehow. So are there any patterns that you've noticed with these women as to how that makes sense to them?
I wouldn't say that they think there's still hope somehow. I think that they would say that there could, like, I mean, do you mean hope as in like they could end up with a baby at the end of this?
I don't know. I guess what I mean by hope is there's a reason to keep going.
Yeah. I think that they just chalk it all up to chance.
Wow. That's really sad.
It is. It really is.
I wonder what the evangelistic opportunities are. I mean, there's this old saying that like death is the great evangelist, and it's really weird because when you're watching God take a life away that you wish he didn't, somehow a lot of people end up coming to Christ, right? And I wonder what kind of evangelistic opportunity there is for Christians with moms and dads in this situation, right? Like, it seems like it'd be a really hard time to hear the gospel, but man, if that's what you're left with is just roll the dice and see what happens. That would come across as really good news.
Yeah, I think, well, and having talked to some people that are not believers that have walked through this, I think that there is an opportunity to speak truth and life and the gospel and share Jesus, because for the first time in some people's lives, I think that they're hearing there's purpose behind these little ones that they lost, and that there's a God who loves them, who was knitting them together, and it's not just all for nothing. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there is a really good opportunity to speak into people's life who are walking through this, and to offer hope when maybe they wouldn't even call it hope, but that's what it is, right? Like there's hope in Christ, and it doesn't mean that they always cling on to that or accept the good news of the gospel right there in that moment. But I think it leaves them questioning what their own beliefs are, and how do you reconcile some of these things.
Yeah. So 2 Corinthians 1:3 through whenever I stop reading. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort which we ourselves have been comforted by God. For as we share abundantly in Christ's sufferings, so through Christ we share abundantly in comfort as well. If we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which you experience when you patiently endure the same sufferings that we suffer. I mean, for the Christian, there's a purpose right there, right? It's like the pain of separation and loss and just all of that going wrong, just all the wrongness that happens, But that might be one thing that God brings out of it, which doesn't, and that's very far from saying like, so it's fine. Hey, turn your frown upside down. It's all good, right? But if there's anybody that can bring beauty out of horror, it's God, and that's one way that he does it.
Yeah.
I think it's been cool to see over the last couple of years, just the little glimpses he's given us into what he is doing through our loss, because it doesn't make it any better. Like, we still wish we had Noah, but it's really cool when God gives us those little sneak peeks into just some of what he's doing and working behind the scenes, whether it's a conversation we get to have or just the hope we get to share. It's been not a opportunity we would have wished to be able to talk about, but it has been given to us as an opportunity, and so it's been neat to be able to take some of those opportunities to have that conversation with other people. Yeah.
There are all these Christian truths that sometimes just come across like cheap sayings if you're not careful, like the platitudes. But one of them, at the root of most of these, is a very deep truth. And one of them is that, like Hebrews 4, right? Like, Christ suffered every way that we have suffered, and yet without sin. And so some of these things that we go through, it's like, okay, so the Bible's claim is that Jesus understands this, that he was here first, right? But how would that be true with a miscarriage? If somebody came to you, which they may have, and said, Jesus is hurting with you. He knows exactly how this feels. He's been through this. And Hebrews 4 says, yeah. I mean, what is there like a scripture or an event from Christ's life that would lead you to believe that he has seen what you're seeing? And if the answer is no, that's perfectly okay.
I mean, yeah, I was trying to run through a few.
I mean, and the reason I ask is just because we do make these claims like, hey, God understands, right? And I just like, the question how is a good question. Yeah. And you learn it in times like this sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, he healed the woman who had a blood discharge for 12 years or whatever, and it's like, I mean, he knew all the suffering that she went through in that.
This isn't his first time confronting this kind of sorrow.
And so it's like he took on every sin and everything for us. So he knows far deeper suffering than anything we can imagine. So it's like, I do have a hard time, I guess, with this particular suffering, like your question was, but just the fact that he took on all sin, right? Where it's like, we can't even begin to comprehend the type of suffering he went through.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you can always go back to the cross, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going through some stuff. This is not the cross. Yeah. Which, for our audience here, not the kind of thing you want to say to somebody when they're in the thick of it. But afterwards, looking back, you can go through some of these reflections, and it's,
But I think that's an important thing to touch on, though, is like there is a lot of things you can say to someone going through it, and they're all really good truths. But sometimes it's just not the right moment.
Sure.
And sometimes it's just sitting and listening, or not even listening, just sitting. And so I think that's important to be said about people going through miscarriage, because you can't always relate. You can't always. There's tons of Bible verses that can apply. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's just not the right moment.
That was the mistake of Job's friends, right? They came up and they had all this lofty theology, and they were right about a lot of it. They were wrong about some of it, but a lot of it was good, glorious truth about God. And then God was like, hey, if Job doesn't pray for you, I'm going to kill you because you have not spoken of me what is right. And my conclusion on that is like, that's not, a lot of what they said was true. That's not the way the truth was meant to be used. Yeah. In sermons before, I've like jokingly threatened people with church discipline. Like, if you go to a grieving person and you quote Romans 8:28, like I will bring you up on church discipline. That is not the time. So then if you guys, and may God forbid it, if your guys' daughters grow up and they go through this, I mean, or, sons' wives, their wife, it's one son, so that's only going to be one wife. But they go through this. Then and you get the phone call, what's your first reaction? What do you do to help and to minister to them when that first phone call comes in?
I think it would kind of depend on what they were wanting in that moment too, because I know for us, we personally took a couple hours just to be together as a family before we had anyone come over. But I think it's sitting with them, it's praying with them, it's bringing meals. That was huge for us. Mm-hmm. And I think...
Why the meals?
It was just nice to not have to worry about it. Mm-hmm. So we had, I think, 4 meals brought over. One of my best friends actually came over as soon as we said it was okay, and showed up with meals and a hug. And that's really all it was. And there wasn't a whole lot said. I know Emily came over after and sat with us and sat with me, which was really nice. Because again, it's not that there's words that'll make it better, but just sometimes the presence. And that's not everyone. Some people would rather probably be alone right away. But I think also just, anyone that goes through it, asking. It was really nice when people asked how Matt was too, because I do think that is important. Mm-hmm. And we had a friend come over. I'd kind of went a little silent on responding for a little bit. I wasn't in a great place. And so she texted me and she said, hey, got your favorite coffee. I'm coming over. I'm either dropping it off or you can let me in. But she brought some devotionals, and it was a husband one and a wife one, and so she thought of Matt in that conversation too, and that meant a lot, just the thought to check in on the family as a whole. And I mean, we had people ask how our kids were and ask our oldest how she was doing, and I think that was really important too, because it's not, yes, it was me going through a lot of the physical stuff, but there was a lot more going on just as a family unit. Mm-hmm.
When it comes to miscarriages and stuff, what should we be talking about as a Christian culture that we're not? You started out by, we opened this and you said, we don't talk about it enough. Mm-hmm. What should the conversation look like in the Christian church regarding this?
I mean, I think we should be very vocal about this. This is a human life, that was lost. We believe that in the church, right? But like the world will say otherwise. So we should stand very firm on that and not start looking like the world. And because just in our actions, how we respond to something like this, if we just ignore it or don't treat it like what it was, a loss of life, then it's like all of a sudden our actions and behaviors are starting to look more like the world, where it's not a human yet, or whatever, someone might say.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons why it's not talked about. One, because of how the world views it, but like specifically in the church, like it's a vulnerable thing to talk about. It's letting someone in to a lot of grief and a lot of emotion and a lot of, honestly, not even know how you feel at the time. And so I think it's hard to talk about, but I think it's worth having a conversation and continuing a conversation about it, because there are a lot of women that have walked through it or are walking through it or X, Y, and Z, and they don't know how to feel. They don't know what they're feeling. They can't put words to it. They don't know how to just get through it. And that really is the only way through it, is through it. Mm-hmm. And so it's coming alongside and being able to have a doorway for conversation, because I think it opens up a lot. Like when I was a little more vocal about losing Noah, people just kind of came out of nowhere that I never expected, to say, hey, I'm going through this right now. I just went through this a week ago. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to feel. I got messages on Facebook from people I hadn't heard from probably in 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was like actively going through a miscarriage at the time, was like, I don't know. I haven't told anyone. I don't know what to do. And so I think when we do talk about it, it opens the door for a conversation, how to help these people and how to help them walk through what they're feeling, or their grief.
Yeah, I think as a culture too, we don't do grief well because there's so many escape routes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so there's kind of a tendency to get through it as quickly as possible, or feel like we're getting through it as quickly as possible, and because of that, you know, we don't, like, I don't know, other cultures, especially tribal cultures, they've got really healthy communal grieving processes, and you know, and they apply them to miscarriages and things like that, because you know, it's obvious that that's a life, right, to everybody except modern secularists. And so yeah, but we don't really have a lot of that in our culture.
No, and I think it's tempting to really want to just get through it and not recognize how like for me, how I was feeling or what I was feeling, or I think the temptation to just like want to brush past it was there.
Well, that's the nature of discomfort,
Right. And I think it's messy. Like people grieving, it's messy. And so how do people walk into that? But I think it's important to be able to walk into that. And then specifically with miscarriage, I mean, just even in planning, you know, the funeral and all that, like there just isn't, like, what do you do? There's not a whole lot of resources out there. And so how do you grieve? How do you grieve well? How do you bring closure? How do you, like, all these things? And then you're sitting there in the midst of your own emotion trying to navigate some of these things that it's just not black or white.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's something after all this Ashley recognized as a ministry opportunity, just helping women with, you know, walking through some type of ceremony or something to remember the baby by, you know, just, and to honor the baby, because we just found, like, we looked for ideas out there and there just wasn't much, you know, it was just.
But that's why you decided to give him a name?
We had already named him, but yeah, we name our kids very early, but.
We do.
Yeah, well, and something you said at the beginning is I think so helpful for people, that, like, you know, there is light afterwards, like, and it does, you know, get better by whatever metric you want to use. It's like, it's, I don't know, it never goes away. The way I've described, you know, grief before with a loss of really anybody is that it doesn't lessen, it doesn't soften, but it does find its place in your new normal, and it's there, but it's okay that it's there, right? So, but I'm noticing this this tendency in our culture these days. I was just talking with Pastor Andrew about this, that we're doing this thing now where we tend to let our grief define us. And that's sort of the new wave, right? And it used to be trauma. Our trauma defined us. And then before that, it was, you know, my disorders. It was my anxiety and my depression. That defines me. But now, like, and it seems like grief is the new thing. And I'm like, I'm worried about that because it's been under-addressed in the past. But now I feel like we're moving to this place where we're not going to let people get over it because they're going to find their identity in I'm the person that's going through a loss. And then that's going to drag it on, right? So, like, what do you think you've learned about letting a loss settle into its place and operating as operating in normal from there?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it for me, and I kind of touched on already, was that grief can coexist with everything else in life. And it's not just I'm grieving, so we're not, I mean, Matt kind of hit on it even in saying, like, what I did for him, like the normalcy of having dinner. Like, I'm grieving, but we're still going to eat dinner. Like, you know, or we're grieving, but we're still going to celebrate our daughter's birthday or Matt's birthday. And so I think I learned a lot in how it can coexist. And that was an interesting thing for me because we've gone through grief before. We've lost family members and all that, but not to the extent that we were when we walked through a miscarriage.
Yeah.
And so just not that you make it part of your normal, but in a lot of ways, like, it kind of does become part of your normal. And it is, I think miscarriage is a weird grief because it is grieving all the what ifs and not, like, it's all the things you never will get to do. And so that was also something Matt and I spent a lot of time talking about, is it's kind of a unique grief in that. You have anything to add?
Also, just, I think it's helpful, you know, it's only been 2 years, but, like, so far each on each time on the day that we lost Noah, we've gone and brought flowers out to a little plaque we have in our yard to remember him. So little things like that where it's like we're not just shutting it off either. That's kind of what she's talking about, but like we're creating opportunities to spend this time in a type of grief, I guess, so it's not like we're just shutting it off, but we're also just not letting it just drag us down and, consume us. So I think that's helpful to have little pockets here and there, where it's like, okay, let's take a moment and remember what we've lost.
Yeah. And I think that's important though too, because it can consume you.
Yeah.
And that's not a healthy place to be.
Little pockets. That's a good way to put that. Yeah. Matt and Ashley, thank you so much for making disciples in this way. And I really, really hope that people that don't have hope in Christ can hear how Christians go about this, because it is possible. Right? We can have joy in the middle of it because of what Christ has done. So thank you guys for being examples of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Hungry for Wisdom is a ministry of Grace and Truth Community in West Richland, Washington. 1 John 4:19. We love him because he first loved us. If you are enjoying Hungry for Wisdom, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share it. Leave us a 5-star rating if you think we've earned it.